nervous. I don't know why I always get like this. But yes, welcome in. Today we are going to be interviewing the absolutely amazing, incredibly brilliant Holly West. So, being an editor is quite different from being an author. I would say it's basically like the other end of the publishing experience. So today we will be hearing, instead of from authors, from the other side. So I think that'll be a really cool, interesting perspective. So I hope you guys have your questions ready. For anyone who is new here, I don't know if there is or not, Talk Story to Me is a semi monthly interview series that we do here on the channel where we invite usually authors on to talk about their books. So our last guest was Margaret Rogerson, and that was so much fun. Today is actually our first time that we'll be having an editor on. So, like I said, we'll be hearing from the other side today. Oh, I'm nervous. Holly is so cool though. Oh my gosh, she's so chill. I love her. So this will be a very fun interview. I'm very excited. I just also get very anxious beforehand because this is who I am as a person. Okay, it is 6:30, so I'm going to go ahead and join the call. Okay, everyone pretend to be normal and presentable. Hey.
Thank you.
Gosh, it's so good to see you.
Hey, it's been a year, but we're still alive and we're still here. So there's that.
I feel like that counts for a lot these days.
It counts for a lot, I think. Yes.
All right, well, would you like to give a short introduction of yourself for everyone?
Sure. I feel like I've not got my camera right. But yeah. Anyway, I am Holly West. I am an executive editor at Will and Friends, which is an imprint of Macmillan Children's Publishing Group. And I have been in publishing for a long time and have worked on many books with many wonderful authors. These are my brag shelves. I have a lot of them.
Oh, wow.
So I chose not to pull out one or two, but just be like, these are my books. I am very proud of them all. They are my babies. But I think, if you want some touchstones, I've worked with a lot of very different authors. I work with Tricia Levenseller, Aidan Thomas, Meg Cabot. I did a series with Mo O'Hara called My Big Fat Zombie Goldfish. That's still I'm a little bit all over the place.
That's the best way to be.
Yeah.
So you've edited every single one of the books on that shelf.
I have done editorial work on every single one of the books on this shelf. A couple of them I was not the main editor for. I just did a pass on, but yeah.
That's so impressive, though. I love that that is like your portfolio. Instead of like writing up a resume, you can just take a picture and be like, here.
Yeah, I mean, if I needed to do that, I would move the stuffed animals, probably. But other than that,
No, I think they add charm. I love the cat teapot also, just personally.
yeah, just, little bits and bobs and pieces. Tiny dragon here, cat teapot there, book themed candles,
Oh,
a Lord of the Rings filled with D&D dice.
oh my God, I love that.
You know.
You gotta personalize the portfolio shelf.
Yeah.
So, how did you get started in editing? What was kind of the process from, did you kind of decide from the very beginning that you wanted to go into book editing, or is it a field you kind of found yourself in? Like, what was kind of the process for all of that?
So I grew up in Southern Kentucky as that girl who reads a lot. And then I was in sort of seventh grade and I found this book. It was shaped about like this. It was very bright pink and it was 101 jobs for book lovers. And all of publishing, all of it was one of those 101 jobs.
Wow.
And I read through all of them, like went through all 101 jobs that were listed there and was sort of like, well, at that point in seventh grade, I decided I was either going to work at the Library of Congress or in publishing. And somewhere in high school, I realized that working at the Library of Congress would mean dealing with politicians, and that was right out. So publishing it was. And I kind of stuck with that. I had a year where I was a substitute teacher, mostly to raise money to move to New York to work in publishing. And that just solidified my deep and utter respect for teachers while also making absolutely sure that I was never going to be one.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so I have so much respect for them. Also, this is not a job for me. And so then publishing it was. And so I did the NYU Summer Publishing Institute because that meant that I had a place to live in New York while I job hunted. And it gave me a job fair to there get connections. And I did a couple of informational interviews, and then I started working. I got hired as the administrative assistant to John Murphy and Dory Weintraub at SMP Publicity. And I did that job for about 2.5 years until I had everything that I was doing down to about half a day's work. And then I would go around and help other publicists with stuff. And I kind of was like, publicity is also not for me. I can do it, but I don't love it. And so then Jean Fywell moved to Macmillan and started with her imprint Fywell and Friends. And her assistant was leaving. And so I talked to her assistant and then interviewed with Jean. And that was the last time that I have been bored at work in my public.
Well, that's always a plus.
So yeah, basically I interviewed with Jean, and it was kind of really fun because like I did enough research to know that Jean was kind of a big deal, but I didn't quite understand how big of a deal she was. And so like I knew she had her own imprint with her name on it, and I was very excited about children's books. And so I just went in there being like, okay, and I had done some research, but I didn't realize that she was behind literally every book in my childhood. Or like not all of them, but like a lot. But we ended up talking about this series called The Girls of Canby Hall, which was the first book series that Jean had ever edited, and I'd never found anyone else who'd ever read it except for me, but I loved it. And for some reason we got on this, and it was the first one book series that she'd ever edited. So it was kind of a meant to be sort of thing. And I've just been working for Jean ever since. I was her administrative assistant. And then we started Swoon, which was a whole other thing. And now I am an executive editor at her imprint. And that's where we're at.
Oh, that's so cool. And what a like journey like to get to where you are too. Like that's such a like encouraging thing to hear because I feel like not everyone always knows exactly what they want to do. So hearing that you started in like a couple different things and found out like, maybe this job isn't as much for me is
Yeah.
really encouraging.
I also think if you're interested in publishing, and this is the thing I tell everybody when they ask me about it, is just get in. It's much hard. Like people who think they might be interested in like editorial, like you almost certainly don't actually know what editorial is like. And there are so many jobs in publishing that I think like it's a lot easier to just get into publishing somewhere and then transition sideways than it is to kind of hold out for the exact job that you want.
Okay.
And the best job in publishing, in my opinion, is administrative assistant to a publisher because it teaches you everything. Everyone knows who you are. You know who everyone is. You're in all of the meetings because you're taking notes. You see how things work and how they fit together in a way that you wouldn't if you weren't looking at it from that kind of perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like that's a good way to get a feel for probably different jobs, right? Because you're communicating with a lot of different teams, so you can get a feel for what everyone does a lot better, I would imagine.
Yeah, and if you have a good boss, which I had a great boss, but um like you try different things because in publishing you're meant at Macmillan at least I can't speak for other houses. I've only been at Macmillan. But at Macmillan, we have a tendency to sort of like um, want to kind of like grow people from within
Hmm.
slowly because like hiring people is a whole thing. But you know, like we want people to grow from within. So like great bosses will sort of like take their admin assistant and be like, okay, so what are you interested in? What's your next step? And as you're learning, as you're coming in as an admin assistant, you can work with editors and learn if editing is really what you want. You can work with design. And like, I know that one of John Yeagan's old assistants became a really successful designer. And other people who have gone on to work in marketing or publicity. And it's just, you know, it's a really great way to see all the different parts and how they work together.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I do have a question, and there's also a question in chat, but before I forget, so this was something that when I was looking at careers kind of put me off trying to get into publishing. You mentioned that you had to work to save to move to New York. Would you say that the publishing industry is still very much based in New York City, or since remote work has become more of a thing, do you think there are more kind of opportunities for people who want to get into publishing who don't necessarily want to live in New York?
Again, I can only speak for Macmillan. I think other houses maybe have different rules. But at Macmillan, we have a sort of hybrid thing where you can work from the office or you can work remotely or you can do a mix. It's basically up to what works best for you as long as your work gets done. I there it is a lot more fluid than when I first started. Like, you know, working remotely wasn't really a thing until,
Hmm.
you know, now we live in the future and can do things like this. Before we could do things like this and have these kinds of calls, it was much more important to actually be in the office. I do know that Macmillan has remote internships now because I work manage our interns at Firewall and Friends, and we quite often have remote interns. Our intern right now is working remotely, and I also know that um, we have had interns, you know, former interns who then were hired, even though they don't live in New York. So I do think it is changing, at least at Macmillan. I can't speak for the rest of the publishing industry in this.
That's really encouraging to hear. Oh. So our question in chat was, would you recommend any specific schooling or training to get into editing outside of actually doing the job itself?
You know, no, you just have to read. You have to read so much. You have to know story, right? Like you have to know story and you have to be able to talk about story. Like I have an English degree with a computer minor. Um one of my fellow F&F editors has journalism, another one has a communications degree. I know an editor who has a history degree. You will need to have a college degree, but mostly what you need to do with editing is read incredibly broadly and then know the genre that you're going to edit really, really well. Like I have read thousands and thousands upon thousands of fantasy novels.
Man, that sounds daunting, but like also very fun.
Well, if you're wanting to work in editorial, you probably love books already. If you want to work, like publishing is not a thing that you go into without loving books in any aspect of publishing because you can get paid more in other things. It's getting better now. They just raised the minimum salary at Macmillan. It's getting
Oh,
better. But like
good.
honestly, you can get paid better in other industries. Publishing is a thing that you do because you love it.
Mm.
Um, and and like, but what you need to do when you're coming in, you're probably going to have to start as an intern, almost certainly at this point. I don't know. I know very few people who um, uh, now, you know, who have recently been hired who weren't interns first. And when you are an intern, like one of you're going to learn a lot about how publishing works by virtue of being an intern. But being an editor specifically requires a lot of knowledge of what you want to edit, because you need to know what's out there, and then you need to kind of understand how stories work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because the more you read, the more you kind of see like what your personal tastes are, as well as what you feel like did or didn't work in a story, which helps inform your own editing. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
How how do you prevent so there's that saying that never make what you love into a job because you'll get burned out eventually. How do you kind of maintain that love of reading when sometimes you are reading just so many things?
uh Sometimes I play video games. Like really, like if I start, I like sometimes if I feel like I am getting burnt out on reading, and it's really, it's a tricky thing because like I read a lot, and then not only am I reading the books that I'm editing over and over and over again, but you need to like kind of know what other people are publishing.
Hmm.
So my to read, like my to read shelf is a literal shelf. There are multiple shelves that are double stacked with things like sideways on them. I am very behind on the things that I want to read. But just like any other, like, and so sometimes you do get into a reading slump, or like if you're like, or this is a problem I have sometimes, is I have so many things that I need to read for work that I feel a little bit guilty taking time to read for myself. And I have to get past that. And I, I normally can, but if I start feeling like that, or if I start feeling like I've just like gotten overwhelmed, what I do is I let myself play video games. And then, um, and sometimes it will be sometimes it will just be like, I need a break from like, I need sort of a break. And so I'll do something like Stardew Valley, which does have a story, but it's very chill and slow, and you can discover it on your own pace. Or, it's not really, it's more like each character has a story that you can discover or not, and you can interact with it at whatever vibe. Or sometimes it will be like, okay, I want a new story, but I just don't have it in me to start another new series when I am doing all this, and then you play Baldur's Gate 3.
Definitely not a time sink at all.
No, I didn't say it wasn't a time sink. I just, and there are things in the middle. You play Dave the Diver. That's like an anime. It's fine. Sometimes you anime. It's just you find your story through other mediums sometimes, right? Like if you're like getting burnout on reading, maybe what you're doing is like, for me, because I do because my genre that I prefer is books that can be sold at Comic-Con.
This is why I
Right?
love your books.
Right? They're books that I think that the thing that I do a lot of genres. I have picture books, I have nonfiction, I have middle grade, I have chapter books. These are out of order age wise. I know that, but it's fine. And then I have all of these YA novels because YA is sort of where my heart is, although I do love a good middle grade adventure. Um, but all of these books, almost all of them, you would feel fine. I would feel fine putting on a table at a con, right? Like I could hand sell them. Even like a lot of the picture books, like I could take Small Night and the Anxiety Monster to a con and be like, and I have taken it to a con and been like, hi, here's a story about a small knight whose parents want them to be a princess, and they're like, no, I am a knight, and it causes an anxiety monster. It's very cute. Here, I show you.
Yes, show us, show us.
It's right here. So like this is Small Knight. This is their friend Tiny Bear. Their friend Tiny Bear. This is the anxiety monster. And they go on a, Small Knight, when the anxiety monster shows up, Small Knight goes to their dad, the king, and their dad says, don't worry, you're safe in your tower. One day a brave knight will come to rescue you. And they're like, but I am a brave knight. So they go on a quest to rescue themselves.
I might have to look into getting myself a copy because that looks adorable.
Yeah. I have a lot of this one. This one was really great. But even though, like, normally when I think of like Comic Con books, you lean toward the YA or like sometimes like the middle grade adventures, like even like that also has that feel of a book that you could take to a con. And that tends to be my genre. But then because that's kind of like where I'm most comfortable with, when I go to cons, I pay attention to what else is at the con, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be like, what are people cosplaying as? Have I seen that show? Do I know what that is? What are the cool what video games should I be aware of? Like, what is in the zeitgeist?
That sounds like such a cool and fun way of like seeing what is in not only your personal like genres that you like to work on and enjoy and kind of learn about more about the market, but also just informing like your own personal tastes. Like you talked about doing video games as a way to kind of take a step back when you're feeling burned out from reading. So great for both career and personal goals.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I like running lists of all kinds of media that I'm like, oh, I should know what this is. And then like when I go to a con, I do the same thing that everybody else at a con does, which is, hey, what new thing should I fall in love with? Tell me.
oh, I love that. That's the best part of cons.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you could kind of give us, I think a lot of people don't quite know everything that an editor does because it's not just editing books. So I was wondering if you could kind of tell us
I can
how,
try
yeah,
it.
like what all do you do and has it changed over the years, like from when you first began?
Yes and no. I go to well, the thing to understand is that there are multiple kinds of editors, and I do a lot of it. And so different publishing houses might have different structures, but there is there are acquiring editors, there are developmental editors. I do both of those things. I acquire the books and then I work on them, but sometimes those are two different jobs, depending on where you're working at. So I acquire the books, I work on the books, I develop them, work with the authors directly to edit them. So an acquiring editor will get um, will get submissions sent to her, mostly from agents, but also by going to like different like writing conferences and things like that. But you get, you know, a bunch of things sent to you, and your job is to sort of read submissions and sort of evaluate them and decide what, you know, what things that you're gonna fall head over heels in love with, what things, and more important, and not more importantly, but equally as important, because publishing is a business and you have to make money, what things can you sell to other people? Um, so I have to find things that I fall in love with and I think are amazing, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to sell them to first to my team, and then, you know, like to my bosses, Jean and Liz, and the rest of the F&F group. Can I get them behind this book? Then I go and can I get sales and marketing and finance behind this book? I have to fill out the paperwork to make that happen. And then they'll do a big pitch to a room full of people and be like, hey, here is this book. I think it is amazing. I really want to work with this author, and this is why I think it can do it. These are the books that I think these are the sales comps, like all of this kind of thing, to get permission to go and make an offer to the agent. Then you negotiate with the agent. And hopefully, eventually, yay, you know, fingers and toes crossed, you actually get to work with the book with the author. And that's where you swap hats from being an acquiring editor to a developmental editor. And you work directly with the author, and you know, that's where you have to like really, when you're acquiring it, you have to know your genre, so you know what other books are out there. Is this filling a hole in the market? Is there nothing else out there like that? Is this new and unique? Or is it similar to this book that has sold many, many copies, and we think this book could also sell many, many copies because it's perfect for the fans of this book, right? Just it's the next thing for these people that they're going to want to read. So that's why you have to know your genre when you're acquiring. When you're developing, you need to know your genre so you can like not do exactly the same thing as 7 other books that already exist, and you can make the book special and amazing and unique and really help it shine and be as great as possible. You want it to, I work with the author, we pass it back and forth, we make it as shiny and as perfect as possible. And then my job as an editor is to shove it at other people with really great enthusiasm. Because there are basically, when the author and I have it as close to perfect as we can get it, I then hand it off to someone called to our managing editorial team or our production editorial team. And they are in charge. This is not a thing that I am good at. This is a different job entirely, production editorial, who they are in charge of getting copy edits and proofreads and routing it to design and coming up with schedules and like all of this. But I'm still involved. I talk to design. I talk to design. I talk to the author. I help, I talk to design so that design can come up with the covers. I look at the things. It's very much project management at that point, right? Like once you get the story right, then you have to take it and turn it into a book, right? An
A
actual
hard
physical
process.
content. Right. And so in that, once we get it ready for copy editing, and then that's when you sort of are the project manager, because you are, things get routed to you and you're like, okay, and then you like, I will look through the copy edits and I will make I will make my suggestions, and then I send it to the author, and then the author sends it back and I look at it again, and then I send it back to the production editor, who will look at it again and then make sure everything looks good, and then they send it to design, who makes it pretty and look like an actual book. Back, and then we do this loop again and again and again. Meanwhile, while we're working with design and we're working to make the book itself look perfect and catch all of the typos, which we never catch all of the typos. It is impossible to catch all. We try our level best. We're sorry. We tried. We are only human. Publishers are only human, and we try really hard, but there are a lot of words.
And books are long.
And books are long. So we do our best to make them as perfect as possible. While we're in that process, I'm also talking to the marketing team, to the publicity team, to the sales team. I am coming up with copy that goes on the book, and then also that I am using to pitch it to the team, right? Because before the sales team can go and sell it to Barnes & Noble or Amazon or your independent bookseller, someone has to tell them what the book is about. And that's my job too. Right? So I go in and we have these big launch meetings where we fill out all of this paperwork so that we give the sales team and the sales team, hopefully, everything that they're going to need to be able to go and get the people I want to get the sales team excited about the book, just so that the sales team can go make the Barnes & Noble buyer excited about the book. I also want to make the marketing team excited about the book so that they can go make ads that will make consumers excited to read the book. So there's a lot of, I think of it as fangirl. I think of it as being a professional fan.
That sounds in theory like an ideal job.
Right? It's a lot. It's a lot. But it's like, hey, come love this thing that I love as much as I love it. Like, I love this thing. You should love it too. We could love it together. And that's the most fangirl attitude that I can think of. So that's why I'm like that. That's why I like cons, because it's all like, hey, let's go be excited about stuff together. And that's kind of what I want everybody to feel about my books. I want them to have that sense of like fangirl ownership over the books, so that they go and like, we can get them out there to everybody else. And everyone can love it together.
That is such a fun way of looking at it. Oh, so it's the process you just described sounds like a lot in many different ways. Are there certain skills that you think someone who wants to be an editor should kind of practice working on so that they can kind of fulfill each of those different roles well? Like, what would you say is maybe some of the most important skills to work on right now for that?
Like I said before, you need to read, and especially you need to read widely, but especially in the genre that you want to work on so that you can get a handle about that. You need to practice talking about story and talking about books. If you can wrap your brain around marketing speak, that would be helpful. But it's more talking about story and talking about story in a way that is compelling, right? Um, you also, it's also, and this is a really hard thing, it's sort of like you're gonna need to learn how to be able to speak in public. Like I took an actual, like once I decided that editorial was where I wanted to go, Jean actually paid for me to take a public speaking, or like Jean had Macmillan pay for my, or help pay for me to take a public speaking course because I would either freeze up or babble. And I still babble, as you can hear, but at least I can babble bullet points now and I don't freeze up.
Did
I
teaching
might
help?
not always remember what I said.
That's how I am. Anytime I give any kind of public speaking, or when I was teaching also, I would just black out for that entire period, and then it was fine. But afterwards, sometimes I just couldn't remember what I said. I just know that I said what I needed to.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, well, I don't remember one of the first big speeches I gave as like a keynote presenter at a conference, but I am sure that it was quite good because a New York Times bestselling author came up to me afterwards and asked me to re-explain some of it because he thought it was really interesting. So I feel like I
Ooh.
accomplished my goal,
Yes.
even if I don't actually remember a single word that I said.
I
Pretty
mean,
sure that it worked.
I would say so. I feel like if people want to talk about it even more, I feel like you did a great job of being engaging and making the topic interesting. So I would say you did.
So it was fine. I will say it was really funny because it was my first conference. It was as a keynote speaker, right? Like my first one as a um, coming in as the editor at this conference. And I had been very nervous about it. So I'd worked really hard putting together like a speech and like a whole presentation for this keynote that I was very excited about. And then the agent spoke before me and basically did exactly the same topic as I'd been planning to
Oh.
cover. So what I ended up doing was scrapping the entire speech that I had actually talked about, except for what I did was I like looked at my whole speech and I crossed out everything she talked about. And what I did was I started my presentation with about 10 minutes with like a few things that were different from an editorial perspective. And I just was like, going back to what she talked about yesterday, here are the things that are different from editorial. And then I just went into I have to fill this space mode, and I started talking about Dean Winchester from Supernatural and why he was the best character in all of whatever. And I got a whole like the 3 stages. I have like a whole presentation that I rebuilt from where I blanked out and started babbling. I was just like, here's where we come. But it's basically, it talks about character in the 3 stages of fangirling or fandom. I can't find a properly gender neutral word for fangirling that has exactly the same connotations. If somebody has one, let me know. But it's basically what I ended up coming down to was taking like, there was a Tumblr meme that was like, oh, he's cute. Oh no, he's hot. Protect him, he's awkward. And I basically just took that and ran with it as I babbled for something like 45 minutes. And then I remember that it ended with, you know, like, and then I ended by talking about Dean Winchester and why he was the best character. And because he was so consistent, you know, and like, even though he at that time was, you know, like, I don't remember what arc we were in, but I like, even though he was like sometimes would do terrible things and become a demon, you still wanted to, love him and protect him, wrap him in shock blankets and feed him pie.
That sounds like such a stressful experience in general when you realize you have to just almost completely revamp your speech. But it sounds like you went a great direction, especially because if it's something you're excited about, you can talk more about it, even if you haven't super planned for that whole new speech. So
Yeah.
I wish I could have heard it.
I mean, like, sometimes chat me about it and I will run you through the basics of it. Basically, it's just like, it was about it ended up becoming about character creation and how to make readers fall in love with your characters as much as I fell in love with Dean Winchester. Or that's the goal. It's a very difficult goal, but you can get there.
Yeah, I feel like character creation and making them endearing while being different from perhaps other characters that have been seen before is such a struggle, but that could be its whole own interview.
It could. It's a whole thing. Like I said, I babbled off the cuff for like, a presentation on it, and it seemed fine.
Oh, someone in chat said, Dean is the best. Man took care of Sam as a big brother and was always willing to do whatever it took.
Right? And that's why you love him, right? Like and also he's incredibly consistent. Like as a character, he is incredibly consistent. They're in like the 300 episodes of Supernatural, there are like 6 moments where he acts out of character, and most of those are the producer's fault.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, because I feel like with a series that long, it's hard to make sure that like the character writing stays consistent while also feeling like the characters are like developing.
Yeah, like every time you found out something new about Dean, you're just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Uh-huh. Yeah, it was great. I was really impressed with it. And I like I said, it's a big giant rant and they want to talk about hear about actual publishing. My feelings on this one character. So
We'll have you come back for another session just for that. So something that I remember really struggling with when I was trying to improve my own writing and learn how to look at stories critically, is I didn't quite understand what editing and revision meant at the time. Like to me, that meant like maybe switching out a few words, adding a sentence here or there. That is more like copy editing,
yeah,
perhaps, I would say. How
yeah.
how do you not suggest, do you have any advice for people who are struggling to kind of figure out how to make that next step, who don't maybe know how to go from like a copy editing sentence level of editing to bigger picture things?
All right. I'm going to approach it from a conceptual level first, and then I'll give you actionable advice. So when this is not my analogy, this was given to me by my brother, who when we were chatting, but so like when my brother, who is very creative and does write and something, when he would want, like we would both, like imagine that your story is a house, right? And you are like, oh, there's a theme, and there's a theme on this wall that we need to shine a light onto. Dylan, as an author, his instinct was to set up elaborate mirrors to bounce the light from its current light source all the way down the hallway and through the house until it hits the theme, right? And do a lot of teeny tiny changes. When I come in to edit something, I'm like, you know what? We could just move this building and the light can shine through the window onto the wall and it'll be great because this is your world and you can move crap, right? Like it's a story. We can move this building. We don't need it. That building can go away. And then like Dylan was like, well, this building isn't in the way. We can't get natural light. We must thread it through like this. And that's also valid. That is a way to do things. But when you're in but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of like carefully maneuvering things, and it requires more from your reader. Whereas if you're in early draft edits, everything except the heart of your story should be considered flexible, right? Like, do you really need that building to be there? It's your world. Move the building. The building could be on the other side of the house, and then the sunlight can fall on the theme. So that's kind of the way to think about it, is to remember that when you're thinking about it, you've worked really hard to create this world, but it is your world. And you can do anything you want in your world as long as it doesn't break your own rules. So as long as you don't break a rule that you have established and contradict yourself, you can do whatever you want. That building doesn't have to be there. So conceptually, that's how I would think about it, right? Is that your world is fluid until it's published. The other thing, but practical ways of getting into that headspace is, once you finish writing something, put it in a drawer. Like, set it down, I think, for like 6 weeks, at least a month, if not 6 weeks. Like, just don't even look at it. Go write something else. All right? Watch some TV shows, play Baldur's Gate 3, whatever you need to do. But reset your brain and get it out of that story for a second, for a little bit of time. Then, when you come back to it and you're ready to start revising, the first thing you need to do is outline like an editor. What you want to do is read the first chapter and write down exactly what is on the page. Don't fix it. Don't do anything. Just write down, like, a sentence per scene, what happens in this scene. Like, sum up this scene in one sentence. Include if you need a couple of sentences, okay. Try not to get longer than that, though. You want to just be able to have, because at the end of it, you want an outline that has the chapter number, if it's a multi-POV, put who the POV is. I tend to add page numbers just because it helps me tell if the book is wildly uneven, right? Like, I worked on one draft of a book where one chapter was like a chapter that was mostly like world building was like 40 pages. And then the chapter that was like the next chapter, which was like where the character development happened, was like 10. And I was like, you need to equalize this, if not reverse it. So having the page numbers was helpful for that. Sometimes I do math. Mostly I try to avoid the math, but occasionally the math. So having the page numbers is helpful. But the point is that you want to write down what's actually on the page versus what's in your head. And having the gap away from it will help. And then once you've made it, and if you get to something that you see isn't working and you have a thought for how to fix it, don't stop your read through. Just make some bullet points. There. I do this for every book that I know I'm going to work on. I actually have a handwritten outline for every book that I edit. And it's just chapter number, it's like chapter number, page numbers. This is what happens. These are my thoughts and questions and reactions. Sometimes I use emojis. Occasionally, there was one book that inspired me to go track down GIFs, and I literally wrote this GIF in like little parentheses so that I could add it. And I added them for the author in the edit letter because that was the kind of relationship we had.
I love that.
But like, what you want to do is keep track of what is actually on the page and what you are feeling when you read it. And like, you as the creator will not have the same feelings as me as a reader, but what you can track is what is actually happening on the page, right? And you want to get all the way to the end of the book before you stop and start rewriting and doing things. That's why you have bullet points when you have thoughts. Because once you have that outline with the bullet notes and the, like a sentence per scene, it gives you a map of what the shape of your story is. And it's so much easier to move things around in an outline than it is when you've got hundreds of thousands of words of text.
Yeah, and especially if, like, maybe in the beginning you think there's something you want to change, if you go and change it, but then later you realize, oh no, I have to scrap the entire thing or I have to do something different, then you've just created a lot of work for yourself that you didn't need to do. Whereas if you wait until the outline is finished, then you can do it all at once. You have a
You
better
can
picture. You're not looking at it piece by piece, but at the overall work.
as a whole. Also, the amount of times when I've needed to know something in chapter 4 and the actual answer is in chapter 16. And I'm just like, okay, well, you gave me this information in chapters, it's in there. It's just like 12 chapters after when I needed it. So let's figure out how to move this information here where I needed to know it. Right.
Hmm.
And that's a lot easier in an outline because you'll be like, oh, here is the information that I needed. I don't remember when, but I can skim up my outline and be like, yes, in chapter 4, I had a bullet question that was like, what, how does this work? And then you answer it, later.
Hmm.
I think instead of that way, a lot of times creators will have, not always, but often creators will have the answers in their in there somewhere, or like you'll know the answer. If it's you reading it, you'll know the answer. When it's
Hmm.
me, if I'm reading it, I don't know. I don't know how that works, but I will find it often I will find it later. But it's a lot easier to rearrange things, to like find to like move scenes around so that they flow better, or like so that you can like figure out things. Or if you're like, okay, well, this person shows up 6 times but doesn't actually impact the plot. Or if you're reading through and when you distilled the scene down to a sentence, you didn't mention this person at all. So you're reading through your outline and there's a character that you love, but they're never mentioned in your outline because they didn't materially affect any scene. Then you can be like, do I really need this character, or is this a character who belongs in a different book? There's a lot of things that a really properly done outline can help you.
Uh, Sorry, I'm reading a question in chat and I'm not sure if I understand it. So I might ask for a bit more clarification. But he asked, are there any differences with the relatively recent, compared to books as a whole, prevalence of digital books compared to traditional books that you need to account for when giving editorial advice?
No, books are books. You Whether a story is a story, you need to know what format it's going to be told in. It is different editing a graphic novel versus a novel versus a picture book. You need to be aware of what age range you're aiming it at. You need to be aware of your audience that you're aiming it at. But the story, it should be the same, whether it's an ebook, an audiobook, or a physical print book. To me, I think. I think some of the things that like I have learned several, like you do need to be aware when you're editing of things like um, you know, kids, especially where I'm working in kids books, but in adult too, like cell phones are a thing. So like everyone has a cell phone. And so like if you have a plot point that requires that can be solved by them Google searching something, they probably will Google search it.
Mm.
And so that kind of stuff you have to be aware of. But I don't change how I edit something based off whether it's going to be an ebook or a print book. In fact, almost everything that I've edited is in ebook and print book, and many of them are also an audiobook, and it was all the same process.
And how long, I think this is another area where people don't realize just how long it takes to create a book. How long would you say the process is from acquiring a book and the book actually coming out on publication day?
Oh, it's different for many different books, but like I have to get it into copy edit, or ideally they ask me to get it into copy editing a year before it goes before pub. I can squish that if we're running late and we need that, but not by much, and especially not if we want it to have like pretty effects. So yeah, any like a book that's from me turning it into copy editing. Before that, it depends on the speed of how fast the author writes, how many edits we need to have made. Like I would say 2 to 3 years is probably standardish, but it could be more.
I was just
I don't think I have many that are like 18 months is the most minimum, like that I've ever heard of, it's not the most minimum I've ever heard of, but it's definitely the shortest I think I've personally done.
and even that sounds insanely short for everything you have to do.
It was insanely short. Like that was really rough. We try not to do that. I think something closer, like if I'm like acquiring a book and it's in pretty good condition, like I think I tend to estimate like 2.5 years, 2 to 2.5 years, but then I also have a really bad habit of like getting things into copy editing a little bit late because I'm like, I want to do this there. And so like I'm trying to get better about that. Also Fivel and Friends has a pretty fast turnaround compared to some of the other imprints at Macmillan Children's. Like I know other people who are like, who will be like, oh, we will need 3 years minimum to work on that book, right? Like they acquire it and then they plan it for like 3 years out.
Yeah, I just remember when I first started getting into kind of the writing side of the publishing industry, being so surprised at how much time it took. Because when I was younger, I thought, oh, well, you just sell the book and then that's that. And then it's all ready.
No, especially in children's books where we do a lot of printing, where we traditionally do a lot of printing overseas. So you have to build in shipping times. That like, and also just like America is big, so you have to ship things across the country. And like there's like shipping times that have to be built in, there's printing times, there's like proofing times. Like once you send something to copy editing, the book is not done. Like I said, there's a lot of, it goes to a copy editor who is going to need at least a month or ideally 6 weeks to 2 months to look at it. And then it comes back and then we have to give the author time to make the copy edits. Plus, then we have to like give other people time to review the copy edits, because unless it's a rush crash book, we need to, like everybody has things. Cause like I also am working on a lot of books at any given time. Right? Like, I might be working I might touch anywhere from like actively be doing some editing on some part of the process, anywhere from like 30 to 60 books a year.
Man, that's a lot, because
that's not how many published that I have edited per year. That's closer to like 10, 12, I've gotten up to like, in the height of like in the past, I kind of like overextended myself and had something and had it like bigger lists than that. But I generally do like 10, 12, 15 books a year that will come out, that will publish. Like 12 is probably the right number, but sometimes there's a little less, sometimes there's a little more. And I have done way more than that in the past. But I'm not just working on this year. As an editor, I am working on the books that are coming out in hardcover this year. I'm also working on taking books that came out in the last, like the year or the year before, in paperback, and also updating the metadata and making sure everything is right on Amazon. And if they are up for an award, making sure you put that on the internet so that people know that. And then I'm also looking ahead at, I'm probably doing copy edits and routing on books that are coming out next year. And then I'm editing books that are coming out the year after that.
How do you have enough time in a day for all of the things you have to do?
No one does. Not a thing. Time is not real.
It's just a construct that we have invented ourselves.
Yeah. Not real. You just do what you can, right? And you go to the meetings, you do what you can. I go through routing. I think most editors actually do most of their reading outside of business hours. There's just not enough time in a business day to do it. I was excited because today I got to take a couple of hours and actually work on editing an outline like during the day, and it was very exciting.
So you must not have very much of a clearly defined work-life balance. How do you kind of handle that so that you don't? I know we talked about burnout with reading, but how do you not get burnt out when it sounds like you're constantly working even off the clock on your books?
I guess that I do. Work-life balance is something that I personally struggle with. Do not follow my example. I am bad at it. I want that on record. I, Holly, am bad at work-life balance. Other people, it is possible to be an editor and have a much better work-life balance than I personally have. That said, I think one of the skills that you talk about being that is good for edit, like you were asking earlier about editorial skills. I mentioned sort of like reading a lot, and I mentioned reading a lot and being good at communicating and public speaking. The other thing that is really helpful as an editor is being good at triaging and time and organizing the time. Not so much time management, but more because like I know some editors who can sort of like plan when they're going to do things, and I stand in awe of them. My world is much more chaotic than that. I do things sort of like, I literally take my to-do list and I triage it by, how, like, do I have this much time in between meetings? Great. I will do something that takes me roughly this much time. If I'm in meetings, I do things. My email inbox is never at zero. It will never hit zero. I have accepted this. That I get so many emails, like I get so many emails per day. I skim through them. I read the ones that are important. I answer things from authors. If I miss one from an author, I apologize profusely or an agent, I apologize profusely when I find it. I kind of skim through things and I deal with them as I can. I've accepted that it will never be a perfect email at zero kind of thing. I also read quite quickly. I slow down a lot when I'm line editing, but if I'm just reading something, like if I'm reading a submission, I can do that fairly quickly. And if I'm if I'm creating the outline, obviously that's slower than just reading. If I'm creating like a first pass outline, and then I often have to like sit with things or talk them out when I am trying to figure out how to do the thing, and I am not an author, so writing the edit letters takes me a while because I don't trust myself to be able to convey my meaning properly, so I tend to be wordy in my edit letters, so they take me a while to put them together. But the other thing is to be aware of the fact that you do need work-life balance, and to let yourself have time to be like, okay, I have been working on this. It is, 7:00, and well, like it's 7:00. I could keep pushing through, but I don't think I'm going to get done with it. So instead, I'm going to stop now, go get a food, and then spend the rest of the evening playing video games so that I can reset my brain and come back tomorrow and get to the end of it. Mm-hmm. And it's very much sort of learning when your best times to work are, roughly, like I will never know how long a line edit will take me. It depends entirely on how many changes need to be made. And I don't know that until I've read it, right?
Yeah.
I do know that a line edit will take me a long time.
Mhm.
And so I kind of have that is a thing that I have learned. Whereas a first draft read will take me less time. Um, Obviously dependent upon how many changes it is and how broken it is. But like just reading something and then making this outline will be probably better than a line edit. But if a book is 400 pages, if this book is 400 pages and this book is, 200 pages, the 200-page one is not going to take as long. So it's very much kind of like getting a sense roughly of how long something is going to take you doing this, and also remembering that I really love my job. Like, I sound like I am complaining, but it's mostly me trying to like give you an idea of how it is. But like, I get to read things and people share stories with me, and then I get to fall in love with them. And if I love something to an unreasonable extent, I get to obsess over it, and people pay me money for this.
It definitely
Right?
sounds like the sort of job you have to really be in love with for
You do.
all of the things involved.
You really have to be in love with it. You have I think publishing is one of those things where you could do it without caring, and you might have a better work-life balance if you didn't care quite so much, but like you're not going to have as good of books, I don't think. You
Hmm.
know?
I could see
Like,
that.
I think one of the things that makes storytelling and creative industries special, and one of the things that makes me love my job so much, is because I am allowed to love things, right? Like I am encouraged to find things to get really, really excited about,
Mm.
right? I am encouraged to be excited about my books. I do have to approach it with a sense of reason, which was a lesson that I had to learn, because it is a business, and like sometimes things don't work and no one knows why, and then we're just all like, but I don't understand. And like not every book that I fall in love with, I'm not going to be able to sell every book that I fall in love with, right? And that is a bit of a heartbreak. And sometimes you fall in love with things, and then and then they go to auction and you lose them, and then you're just sad for the rest of eternity about it. But it's
Oh,
it's a slight overreaction, but that's kind
oh.
of
But I
talk
feel like
about
that just shows how much you care.
that is kind of how people talk about things, right? Like,
Hmm.
um and it's because, but the other thing to remember is that, and the thing that I found really important is to, especially if you have perfectionist tendencies like I do, is that you have to give yourself grace, and you have to recognize that you're only human, and that you do have to do things like remember to eat, and reset your time, and take time away, and like and it's okay to and to like go do other things, and make sure that you have that work life balance so that you don't burn out and,
Hmm.
just fall over, because I do love my job, and it would be a shame if I burnt out. So I take care to try to not do that. Um, but it's very fun. It's very frustrating. It's very chaotic. But that's where I live. And I feel like if you were, and it's also kind of because I think my personal chaos is partially because of how I am, right? And because of I tend to work I tend to work with authors who mesh well with me, you know?
Hmm.
And so we and on one hand that's great because we see the books the same way. And on the other hand, it does tend to like amplify the chaos. People with different kinds of neurospiciness working on the same project, it's great, it's fun, but it does, you know
I could see that.
yeah.
Someone in chat had a question, and then I think I'll ask if you have any advice for anyone who wants to get into the publishing industry that we haven't covered, and then start wrapping up. Uh,
All right.
but someone asked, do you ever turn down acquiring a book due to your current workload despite wanting it?
Um, I have passed along books to other editors that didn't need me.
Okay.
So one of the things that if there is a book that I love,
Hmm.
like there was a book once, it was I'm not gonna name names, but it was a book, it was a middle grade novel, and I was reading it and I missed my subway stop because I got so caught up in it. And like I was like, okay, wow, right? There's something there. Like I'm really caught up in this book. And then like I did it again, finishing it on the subway. So I used really great submissions reading time. Um, but like I like got so caught up in this book that I missed my subway stop twice. That was a book that grabbed me, right? But it wasn't but I had a very full list. I had a very full list. I was overextended right then. I didn't have bandwidth for it. And it wasn't broken. You know what I mean? Like I personally will fall in love with something that is very that like if there were like the characters are amazing, but there are some giant plot holes. But I know I can fix them because I can see it. Right? So I will take something that is maybe not ready to be published, and I'll like sometimes I would acquire it and then work with the author, or sometimes I would do what's called a revise and resubmit, where I would call the author, talk to them very quickly for an hour, and then if they took really good notes and made most of the edits, then I would bring it to acquisitions. Right? Like I would be like, I really like this. I think these characters are amazing. I can't publish it as is because these things. And then we would, if they were open to doing the revise and resubmit and they agreed with my vision, then I would read it again. And then if they had gotten like 80% of the way there, I'd be like, okay. And I would bring it to acquisitions. But the book that I was talking about where I missed my subway stop twice, it was basically ready. It needed some line edits and some small tweaking, but it wasn't anything that needed a big picture edit, like the kind of thing that I'm very good at. So what I ended up doing was I brought it to our team, and I brought it to Jean and Liz, and I said, I think this is great. I don't have time to work on it, but I missed my subway stop twice reading this book. And they were like, and so we let someone else who was more junior on the team be the editor for that one and get that experience and be the person who owned that book. And brought it to acquisitions, and like I helped them bring it to acquisitions. I connected them with the agent. I helped them do that process to get it in, but then it was their book and they were the ones in charge of editing it. But that way it was still published, but it was there. A lot of times also, if I am reading a book and it is I'm reading a book, but I have like a lot of things, if it's going, if it has like another offer in on it and my stress level is like, and it's not something that I have a very particular vision for, sometimes I will just be like, I will let as long as I know it's going to be published elsewhere, I will be like, I trust that editor to do this correctly.
Well,
I don't do that very often because it is a business, and if I can see it and I can see how to sell it and I love it, then I want us to work on it. So then I would bring it to our team and be like, hey, does anyone else love this? But if it's something that I think is great, but I don't have a vision to sell it yet, sometimes I'll set and see if it comes to me, but sometimes I'm like, oh, great, someone else has a vision for it. I don't have that vision. Go forth, and then I will read the finished book when it's done.
I mean, it sounds like a healthy way of going about it, though, so you don't overextend yourself.
I still overextend myself. I have a lot of stuff. I'm just telling you honestly, I still overextend myself, but I try to be aware of it and to really at this point, many years in, I try to be a little bit like aware of my bandwidth, because I feel like I don't want, the other thing is I don't want the books that I've already fallen in love with and acquired to suffer because I don't have time to work on them properly. So that's the other thing that I tell myself. But if there's a book that I really fall in love with and I think is going to be amazing, I will try my best to make it work, because that's the joy of publishing.
Well, I know we already talked a lot about kind of advice into editing, but whenever I wrap up these episodes, I always ask our authors we have on what their one piece of advice would be for writers. So, what would be your one piece of advice to writers or anyone aspiring to getting into publishing that we haven't already talked about?
Um, my one piece of advice to writers is finish it. I can't fix it if it's not finished. You can't fix it if it's not finished. Like, you think you can, but you're gonna end up having to revise it again anyway. Just finish it first. That's my piece of advice to writers, is finish it first. Then you can fix it. Preferably like 6 weeks after you finish it. Like, give yourself time. So that you can come back to it fresh. That's my advice for writers. My piece of advice to people wanting to come into publishing is, as I said, I think I said it before, but be open, because until you have worked in publishing, you're not going to understand how publishing works. And I will tell you honestly, I have been in publishing for well over 15 years at this point, and I still learn things about how publishing works. All right? Like, it's very, very, very chaotic. And it's, you're not gonna really understand what a role entails until you're in publishing, right? So I think the biggest thing is when you're going in, is be open to things, right? Especially things like an admin assistant job, which I still hold solidly is the best way to learn about publishing, is to come in as sort of the admin to a publisher or other executives, so then that you can get that sort of big picture view of how everything fits together. But even if you think that your heart and soul is in editorial, maybe it would be worth it to try an internship in sales or subrights or something like that, if you think that that might be something that you would be interested in, because it's so much easier once you're inside of publishing to go sideways than to get in.
That makes sense. I feel like it's always easier to move to where you want to be once you have your foot in the door, and especially with things that are I imagine like editorial internships are probably pretty competitive. So even if you can't start out there, like if you can get there, get some experience, even if it's not in the field you want to end up in eventually, you might learn, like you said, like you might end up falling in love with a different aspect.
Yeah. Like I said, I went into I went through the NYU Summer Publishing Institute, and I think publicity or editorial, but I had multiple informational interviews, and then the publicity job came through first, and I learned a lot in that publicity job, right? But one of the things I learned is that I don't love publicity. Like, I can do it, I just don't love it the way I would need to make it my career. So that's when I started hunting for other jobs, and then I found this one, and editorial was the thing and then I became Jean's admin assistant, and I learned about all of the different things and how they work together, and I did end up going into editorial, but it could have gone a different way. It's just, this is kind of where my skill set fell, and kind of what I fell in love with. But I never regret having started somewhere else and having those skills. Plus, it means that when I do end up going on tour, that means that like when my author goes on tour, I can go with her. And I know how to do all that bit because I did publicity.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Before we end the episode, are there any upcoming books you want to shout out that you've been working on that you're really excited about? I mean, I know all of them you are excited about, but any coming up in the near future?
Oh my goodness, what year are we in and where are we talking about? Oh, I am so lost in time and space, you have no idea. Let me think. I think one that's coming up that I'm pretty excited about is called uh, Coffee Shop in an Alternate Universe by C.D. Lee. And it is this really fun, cozy fantasy about two girls who meet in a coffee shop and they're from different universes. And then they, fall in love and save the world. But mostly it's very cozy. So that one's fun, and the trade paperback of this one is going to have these really pretty pink stained edges, so I'm really excited about that too.
Oh, I love that.
I like it when we can do pretty fancy things, so that's going to be super fun. One that I was just working literally today. I was working on the sequel to this one, so it's going to be 20 before that one comes out, but the this is Daughter of the Bone Forest. I'm really excited about this one. It's really, really fun. It's got like magic school and this like really fun queer normative world and like so much pining, so much.
And that cover is gorgeous. Holy crap.
And in the sequel, when book 2 comes out, Daughter of the Cursed Kingdom, they're going to be looking at each other across the books. So the two looking at each other or like be facing each other, it's going to be really great.
Okay, well now I have to get into this series.
I really like it. It's really fun. That one was one of my revise and resubmits where I fell so hard in love with I don't think the author would mind me telling you this. She's about it. But I fell so hard in love with the characters. And then I was like, I can't publish this as is, but I love these characters so much. Can I just talk to you excitedly for a while? And it was going to be like a few minutes, and then it ended up being like an hour and a half. And then there was a revision that was most of the way there. And we went through it. And now I'm really excited to be, working on the second book in that one with them. And just so that I have like a nice range. I am also working on the second book of both of these graphic novel series. So both of these are coming out.
I'm noticing a theme.
Time soon. It's, actually we have 3 cats in this apartment, but for some reason the graphic novels that came in were both dogs. And so, this one is about Frankie who saves a dog from a bully and then gets offered the chance to become the dog knight and join forces with the Pantheon, this council of dog superheroes to save the world from chaos gremlins. And this is the first book in a trilogy. We're really excited about that. We just started work on book 3. Book 2 is coming out like 2026. And this is D and Doggos. They are doggos who play D&D.
See, this is why I love you as an editor, because everything you touch, I'm just immediately like, I want to read that. I don't care that it's middle grade. That sounds amazing.
It's fun. Like, I loved D and Doggos. It was a web comic that I found during the pandemic when we were all like very, kind of there, and like reading this pandemic brought me joy, or reading this comic through the pandemic brought me joy. And so when I saw that Scout was pitching a graphic novel version of it, I was like, Scout, come work with me, please. And then it's like I bought it, and then I did my normal chaotic thing of being like, I love everything about this except we're going to have to start over from scratch.
Oh my gosh, how much fun though to be reading something online and then have the opportunity to like publish it and help with the editing of it. That sounds so amazing.
Well, it was really, really, really fun. We found that, and I just was like, I was like, I love this. But when we started the graphic novel, we decided to sort of like, instead of publishing the adventure that was already online, we decided to sort of like, because we wanted it aimed at middle grade readers, who we decided to sort of start at level 1 and have them go through so that they could like learn how to play the role playing game. It's not named as D&D, it is a role playing game like D&D. And but we actually made the role playing game as a
Oh,
it's
wow.
called size. So you can get a role playing like a beginner's easy to learn how to do a tabletop RPG, easy to learn with the characters already there. Like if you've never played a TTRPG, we have a very simple beginner one with these doggos on Scout's website and on the Macmillan website that we made to
I
go with
love
it.
that so
Fun.
much. You got to get them started young.
Right. Well, I mean, like, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's having just such a boom. And there's been whole like studies done about how helpful it is for kids. And I'm just like, we should show them how it is, and what better way than with doggos.
I just love everything about that.
Oh, and book 2 has a cat. His name is Toast, and he does feral magic that goes wrong in spectacular ways. I love him so much.
He sounds like my cats if they were involved. Well, one of them would hide the entire campaign. The other would be just Chaos Gremlin.
Yeah, Toast is on the Chaos Gremlin side of things, yes, as is proper for cat.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us today, especially taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule. I really appreciate it, and I know everyone in chat does too. So thank you so much.
Of course, it was super fun. I'm glad we got to chat.
Me too. We'll have to like actually catch up offline at some time. I'd love to hear how you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, thanks. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Oh my god, I love her so much. Ah! She's so cool. She's so cool. She is so cool. Ah! God, I love her. I love her. I can't express that enough. I don't know, like, she's everything that, like, you want in an editor. Like, she's super nerdy. She's super, like, passionate. And, like, she knows her stuff. The things she comes out with are like everything she described in the end there. I was like, well, fuck, now I have to go out and get this because this sounds brilliant and amazing and I want to read it. She has that touch and that ability to like find great things and make them like even better. Oh, I'm so glad she came on. That was so fun. That was amazing. I know. I'm so glad you guys enjoyed it too. So much fun. All right, let me do the official podcast episode wrap up because I do literally forget to do that every single time. Uh, Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Talk Story to Me. I'm not sure what platform you are listening or viewing on, but this podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. So thank you for listening. This is a series we do semi-monthly. However, it is dependent upon if and when I can get authors to come in, so we are a bit inconsistent with our schedule, but I try to do it about once a month or two. So yeah, please look forward to our next episode, and I hope you're doing well and taking care of yourself. All right, see you next time. Bye! Okay, I've done the official wrap up. We can be our usual nonsensical selves again. Oh, that was so fun. That was so fun. I could never do what she does. She does so much and she does it so well. That was incredible. But also hearing her talk about just how much she does, like I had a general understanding that it was a lot. Did not realize just how much until tonight. That's a lot. I definitely would not have the bandwidth to do that. I think I would get burned out is the problem. Like I love reading. I don't know if I love reading enough because it's not just reading like a book once. Like when I was working with Holly on my book, we went through 4 rounds of like major edits. Um, so it's rereading the same book many times in a row, in addition to, like, she said she's working like, oh, I forget the number she said, like 30 books a year at the same time. So, like, the amount of work involved in that and like headspace, that is so impressive. It definitely is a career I think you have to love if you want to go into it. I don't even have the mental bandwidth to do my own job. I can't imagine doing that. Yeah, because I feel like editorial has evolved so much from like, you're not just editing books, you are doing all of these different aspects. So even if you like want to edit books, there's just so much more involved in it now. If I could just do the reading part, it'd be golden. Unfortunately, I think that's only like 30 to 40% of the job arc. All these podcasts make me want to work on that story idea I've had in the back of my head for years. You should. Why not? Even if you don't like pursue publication of it, like I am always in favor of like writing for the sake of writing, writing about things you're passionate about, just writing. Like you don't have to have like some big end goal of publication. And in fact, I think that can often hurt writers. I know I was so fixated on publishing a book for so long when I was younger. And then when it happened, I just felt empty because I kind of lost sight of like my love of writing in the goal of, well, if I'm not published, I'm not a real writer. I have failed. My writing's not good enough. Which was really detrimental, and also none of it was true. So I think write for the joy of writing. Everything else can come later. But if you just want to write something, just write it. What's stopping you? Create for the sake of creation's sake. Have fun. I turn my stories into homebrew TTRPG campaigns if I get excited about an idea. See, I feel like that's creating for the sake of like having fun and creating. Like, not everything has to be a certain way or in a certain form. If it's a story idea you're excited about and you find a way to implement it creatively and have fun with it, I mean, yeah. Have fun is the moral of this story. But even then, it's been so long, I very much doubt my writing is up to snuff anymore. I don't know. I'm a bit biased because I would say if it's been a while, then just write. I also think the only way to get better at writing is to keep writing. So even if you're worried that like your writing isn't good enough now, it will not improve unless you write and practice. So I would say regardless, just write. Improvement will come along the way. But if you don't, kind of like how we were talking about earlier with Holly, if you don't have anything to fix, then it cannot be fixed. Just finish it. That was another hard lesson to learn. But sometimes, even if you think it's bad, you just have to finish it, put it on the page, because you are your own worst critic, so you're not actually going to know if it's bad or not. You're just always going to think it is anyway. So write, get the practice in, get your ideas out, have fun. I also don't need to make the main characters this way. I offload that onto the players. I just get to make the cool setting. Yeah. I mean, I think it's implementing creativity in the way that is the most fun for you. Whatever form that may take. Just have fun. All right, everyone, have a good night and have a great rest of your week. I'll see you next time.